This video will provide context for my philosophy course. Since it's a video and since you can pause it and read these pages, I won't always leave them up long enough to read them in real time. I'm expecting you to pause them and read them. We'll follow these 3 steps in explaining and giving this background context. The earliest writing seems to have been invented in these 2 areas. The actual regions here were called things like Sumeria, Akkadia, Babylonia, Assyria. They're all grouped under the general title of Mesopotamia, which means the land between the rivers, the 2 rivers being the Tigris and the Euphrates. From the 800s on, much important writing was done in Greek and Hebrew. Around 330 BC, Alexander the Great led a conquering army through these territories, and the influence it had on history was bringing the Greek language to those areas. The Roman Empire at its height covered this space. Here's the rough timeline for Roman power. When they say the fall of the Roman Empire around AD 500, what that really means is the fall of the Western Empire, not the East. From the 600s on AD, we have the rise of Islam. That's in orange here, spreading throughout these territories. Starting around AD 1500, we can see a change in this part of the world that we call the beginning of the beginning of modern Europe. Now we'll go back through the same maps and explain how they're relevant to the historical context. Here is 3000s BC on, earliest writing. We find the beginning of some philosophical ideas in these areas. Wisdom literature is things like proverbs, sayings. And an important point is that around the time of Jesus Christ, the ability to read these writings of these people was lost. So for almost 2,000 years, these writings had no direct influence on anybody. In the 1800s, roughly the middle of the 1800s, Europeans started deciphering, decoding the cuneiform script from Mesopotamia and the hieroglyphics from Egypt. Hebrew writings are most important because they include the Hebrew Bible, or what Christians call the Old Testament. It's been, of course, extremely influential. Greek writings are huge. It's huge. The largest corpus of ancient writings that survives is in the Greek language. It's a huge body of writings covering more than 1,000 years and many, many, many topics, including philosophy. It's important to note the ability to read these 2 languages was never lost, so they've been able to have continuous influence every year, year after year, up until the present day. Notice on this map, the Persian Empire touches on its western side the Greek region, Greek world, and on the eastern side touches India. And because there's so many parallels between Greek and Indian philosophy, there are theories that ideas got exchanged back and forth through the Persian Empire, but there's not a lot of direct evidence for this. The Persians also contributed to the history of ideas, primarily in a religious system of thought called Zoroastrianism. This explains why Alexander the Great was so great, why he had such an influence on history. the Roman First Republic and then Roman Empire was a unifying force covering a very large geographical region, and it led to the spread of the Latin language everywhere as the language of the upper classes, the language of government, the common language that everyone spoke or was able to communicate in the region. Once the Roman Empire became Christianized, this led to the spread of the Christian religion throughout this entire region. And not creating a lot of philosophy on their own, they took up Greek ideas, translated them into Latin, also became bilingual in Greek and Latin, and spread Greek ideas over this entire region, in addition to the Latin language and the Christian religion. This is Constantinople, and you can see a Greek East, and I have an Eastern Orthodox cross, one branch of Christianity. In the West, we don't have any single unifying political unit. We have a lot of small ones, but we have a unifying religion, what we might call the Roman Catholic Church. Now we have a new language become important, the Arabic language. As Arabic speakers and readers spread throughout this region, they encountered Greek learning because much of this area had Greek schools and Greek libraries. They encountered Greek learning. This led to the Great Translation movement. For 200 to 300 years, major Greek works were translated into Arabic, studied, and then enlarged upon. The Arabic language developed its own philosophy, or a set of philosophical writings called Falsafa, which comes from the Greek word philosophy, and it built on Greek philosophy. If you look at this map, you can see it shows that the Eastern Empire, often called the Byzantine Empire, still a Greek-speaking empire, still exists, still has its capital Constantinople, is still Orthodox Christian, but it gets progressively smaller and it eventually falls in 1453. Meanwhile, in the West, we don't have a single unifying political structure, but we have a single religion, what we might call Roman Catholicism, and we start to have the development of individual languages. From the fall of the Western Roman Empire to roughly the year 1500, we have what we call the medieval period, and medieval is just Latin for Middle Ages, so in English it's often called the Middle Ages. Perhaps the most significant characteristic of this is that there's a single religion in charge. Christianity in parts and Islam in parts. The Christianity is Roman Catholicism, where we have red, and Eastern Orthodox, where we have green. So philosophy is under religion's control during this medieval period. Also in this red area of Western Europe, and also to some extent here in the Greek East, we have a class-based society in three major classes. The way they put it at the time was there are those who fight, those who pray, and those who work. Although those who fight, the nobles, also are the ones who rule. Roughly around 1500, and of course a few hundred years before, a few hundred years afterwards, quite a few things occur which change the nature of European thought, writings, and society. I won't read all of these to you. You can pause it and read them yourself, but I'll sort of generalize. We have the destruction of the old unifying, overarching, controlling powers. There's no longer going to be one church because of a Protestant Reformation. There's no longer going to be one language. There's no longer going to be a sort of top-down power structure based on your family, based on nobility. There'll be a rise in parliaments and the decline of monarchy. No unifying religion. Oh, I think I said that already. You have the rise of individual nations, cities, and business, and scientific, technological things listed here. You also have the encounter with other peoples through world exploration. The world exploration is shown on this map by the arrows coming out of Portugal, Spain, France, England, and Holland. During this last period, we have what we would call modern philosophy, where philosophy can be practiced not under a religion's control. Everything we've shown explains the method of developing European history into three historical periods: ancient, medieval, and modern. Historical means that we have historical, or what we'd say are written records. So that starts around the 3000s BC with the invention of writing. From then until the fall of the West Roman Empire, we call that the ancient time period. From AD 500 to AD 1500, we have the medieval world, where philosophy is under religious control. And then around the year 1500, again, before and after by a couple hundred years, power becomes more decentralized, becomes more secular, not religious. You have increase in science, exploration, trade, business, lots and lots of things. And so philosophy is freed from religious control. This is what we would call the modern world or modern Europe. This particular philosophy course will focus on ancient philosophy. We start by looking at what little writings we have from ancient Egypt and Babylonia. Then we look at Greek philosophy. A central figure here is Socrates. Before him, there are a body of the earliest Greek philosophers who tend to try to explain the natural world, early science. Socrates is important because he represents the first great turn in philosophy, not so much looking at the natural world, but looking at the human world and society, right and wrong, government, and so forth. These between them raise a lot of questions. Plato and Aristotle are famous for writing very, very many papers trying to answer those questions. So they are what we call system builders. They have large-scale systems trying to answer the questions raised by the earlier philosophers. After Aristotle, we have skeptics, Epicureans, and Stoics, which tend to be so much large system builders as to focus more narrowly on certain answers to certain questions. What's not in this course is the later Greek philosophy, what's called Middle Platonism and Neoplatonism, which was very influential on Judaism and Christianity. One reason for that is it's really best to learn about the Bible first, and then when you learn about this later Greek philosophy, it has a lot more relevance, makes a lot more sense.